Tectonic plates part 2. So we talked about yesterday 3 different types of movement that plates do. And let's see if we remember them. Alrighty? Transform, transform, slide. Transform, slide. Transform, slide. Remember, this is the type that typically will cause an earthquake. And that's why California is so prone to earthquakes, because they have a transform plate boundary right there. All right, then we have divergent, divide. Divergent, divide. Divergent, divide. Then we have convergent, collide. Convergent, collide. Convergent, collide. And when they collide, sometimes one will go underneath the other, and that's called subduction. Okay, we'll dive into that even more. So transform, transform, slide. Divergent, divergent, divide. Divergent, divergent, divide. Convergent, convergent, collide. Convergent, convergent, collide, and sometimes go underneath each other. Okay, now you can see that in the picture right here in front of you. This is a great example. If you look right along here, you have a convergent plate boundary. This is an oceanic and a continental. Oceanic is going to go underneath the continental, and that's typically what happens. And if you notice, sometimes when that oceanic comes underneath that continental ripples up a little bit because it's colliding with it. And that's where we're forming that mountain range that you see right here all along the coast. And that's typically why some coastlines have cliffs and mountains not too far from the shoreline. Now, and then the convergent plate subducts and melts right back into that mantle, into that magma. Then down here, you can see right in the very center of our screen where you have a divergent divide. And so the oceanic plates are spreading here, and the magma rises to the top, and that allows new land to be formed at the bottom of the ocean. So most divergent plates are going to be found at the bottom of the ocean. Then we also have, so we had transform, which is going to be creating earthquakes, okay? Don't have a very good picture of that in here, but if you notice, anytime you have two plates that are coming together, there's going to be some disturbances. And that's why we have these little volcanoes that are popping up here and there. And it's simply because you have two plates that are coming together and there's issues and there's going to be cracks. And that's going to allow the magma to come to the surface and create different types of volcanoes. In this case, you have a stratovolcano, you have a shield volcano. You also have some little hot spots here and there. So we'll be talking about that too as we come together. So ready? Let's practice it again. Transform, slide, divergent, divide. Convergent, collide, and sometimes subduct. Sometimes they don't subduct. Sometimes they just both sides go like this. And we're going to do a lab actually next week, Monday, that's going to help you understand that even more. Okay. All right. So like we just said, there's 3 different types of tectonic plate boundaries. Here's where we talked about earlier, that's right at California, you have a transform. And we just talked about it a lot of under the ocean, we have the divergent. I'm going to trace, like if you look right in here, if you can trace with my little eraser as I'm going through, those are all divergent. Those are all underneath the ocean floor, and they are parts where they are spreading out. So if there's parts that are colliding together, there has to be another part that spreads out. And that's where so if you look, you can see where these are coming together on this side, and on this side over here, we have the divergent because they're spreading apart. If you look underneath here, this is a circle that we're going to be talking about a whole lot coming up here. Let's see if I can get you some color on here so you can see this. This comes right along California, and it's called the Ring of Fire. We're going to dive into that pretty soon too. But I'm going to take and just trace that around for you here. And you can see this is all an oceanic plate. But this oceanic plate has a lot of stuff going on it. And so that whole area that I'm looking at, let me erase it so you can see it. You've got divergent plates up here in the north. You've got transform boundaries here in the north, I guess that would be the northeast part of that plate. Then you look, you have divergent down here and you have convergent over here. These convergent boundaries over here have many underwater volcanoes. And so there's a lot of activity in this ring of fire that we call it. Okay. And we'll be talking and singing a bit about that in a future lesson. Okay, so here it is, so you can see it a little clearer where those continents are and where those plate boundaries are. And as you can see, a lot of them are underneath the water. So there's a lot going on underneath on our ocean floor. Okay, now we're going to dive in and you're going to be answering some questions in just a moment about these. And there's two different types of crust that we talked about, okay? So this is kind of going back to the day before's lesson. All right, so I'm going to call this this is going to be our continental crust. Continental crust, and we're going to pretend that this is oceanic crust. And remember, we talked about continental crust. Continental crust is thicker, lighter, but older, okay? Has thicker, lighter, older. Oceanic is thinner, denser, meaning heavier, okay, and newer. Now, when these come together, it makes sense that we're going to have that. If we have a convergent plate right here, that oceanic is going to come right in underneath it. Now, it's still super strong and heavy, and that's why this continental plate will sometimes buckle up and form a mountain range. And we'll talk about that too in our lab on Monday, okay? All right, so let's review one moment, okay? Continental, thick, light, old. Oceanic, thin, dense, heavy, and new, okay? All right, and it's found at the ocean floor, all right? Continental, oceanic, all right? So we've got those two differences. Then we have the movement. Okay, let's go through the movement. All right, so we have transform, slide, divergent, divide, convergent, collide, and sometimes subduct, okay? All right, science rocks.